Back.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. I rise this evening to lend my support to the decision of the government, led by Mr Abbott, to involve this country, along with others, in supporting the government of Iraq in the terrible circumstances that are playing out in that country at the moment. And I place on record my appreciation for the support offered by Mr Shorten and the Labor Party in opposition for the position taken. Acting Deputy President, we are all aware of the shocking activities being perpetrated by ISIL and their associates in Syria and in Iraq. They are indeed a major threat not just to the region but internationally, and I intend to address that in my contribution this evening. It was the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, who has spelt out just some of the atrocities that these people have perpetrated on citizens and others in those countries on a daily basis. To use his words, grave, horrific human rights violations. Targeted killings, Acting Deputy President, forced conversions to Islam, abductions, trafficking, slavery, sexual abuse, and others, regrettably, that are just simply too horrific to be spelled out in the public arena. And amongst those targeted, of course, have been themselves Shia, Muslims, Christians, Yazidi, Shabaks, Turkmen and others. And in fact, I think hundreds, if not thousands, of Yazidi individuals have either been killed, kidnapped, or, in the case of women, sold into slavery. Australia has joined the French, the Italians, the Canadians, the United Kingdom forces and the US in humanitarian and related logistical support activity. And I place on record my support for these actions and the fact that they had to be taken at the time they were. Had they not have been, we were at risk, in fact, of seeing some Indigenous populations in that country actually being completely removed. Basically, apart from humanitarian aid to those who have been in positions where they were at grave risk of losing their lives and, in fact, their populations, the logistical support, as we know from statements from the Prime Minister and in this place from the Defence Minister and others, is to support the Kurdish Peshmerga forces who are opposing the Islamic State forces, have defeated them in the past, Acting Deputy President, and indeed with support we just hope that they will be able to do so. But Australia, and in my view other free countries, have got a severe obligation indeed to involve ourselves in these activities. If I can make the point, Acting Deputy President, that the Australian government, as it always does, is taking its action in full compliance, I repeat that, in full compliance with international law, the international community, and indeed supporting the Iraqi government. At a time, of course, the Iraqi government in a state of transition from the previous Prime Minister al-Maliki to the new Prime Minister, who indeed I think has not yet taken up his position. Where is the threat to Australia, Acting Deputy President? And it's a reasonable question that's being asked in the wider community. Why are we involving ourselves at all in this particular activity? And the answer is very, very clear. We've seen in the past when young Australians, for whatever perverted reason, have travelled to these regions, including in Afghanistan, to join forces with groups like the Taliban, up to two-thirds of them, upon their return to our country, indeed have posed a severe and serious risk to this country. And we, of course, have evidence of that, and indeed it will now fall to our intelligence agencies and others to protect our citizens and others residing in Australia. If that figure, Acting Deputy President, of two-thirds is valid, then it's my understanding from information available that there are at least 50 young Australians are fighting with ISIL forces in Iraq and or Syria at the moment, and about another 100 supporting them, 150 personnel that are known about. If that figure of two-thirds is valid, when the crisis is finished, and indeed it will finish, when that crisis is finished in Iraq, we could reasonably expect up to 100 young people whose minds are perverted as a result of what they've either participated in, seen or been involved in Iraq and Syria, wanting to return to Australia. And it's highly unlikely that, having been activated and motivated the way they will have been, having seen and participated as we unfortunately seem to have seen in the media, that anybody who thinks that they are not likely to pose a threat to this country upon their return is in a land that I don't wish to be in. Let me make it very, very clear from my point of view, Acting Deputy President, anybody returning to Australia who is not an Australian citizen, who it can be shown has participated in this sort of activity, should not be allowed to come into Australia. They should be turned around and they should be sent back to the country of their origin. But of course, if they are Australian citizens, what are we going to do with them? They are citizens of this country. They have passports of this country. And then, of course, a circumstance must exist, if it can be demonstrated, that they have in fact been engaged with terrorists in terrorist activities, then they must be dealt with to the fullest force of the law. We can't, in my view, allow these people to move immediately back into the wider community to corrupt others who might be of a like mind to themselves. Acting Deputy President, in the last few moments, if I may refer to a statement by the Prime Minister yesterday in regard to Iraq and speaking to the other place. He started out with these words: "Many Australians are understandably apprehensive about the risk of becoming involved in another long and costly conflict in the Middle East." And on reading that, it resonated with me, Acting Deputy President, because apprehension was the right term. In 2003, our youngest son, and then a lieutenant with the Light Armoured Corps, with the Royal Australian Armoured Corps, was directed with his troop into Baghdad at the immediate, what I believe to be the conclusion of hostilities. Their role was to actually protect the Australian Diplomatic Corps, who were based in Baghdad. He was there for some 6 months. They were very, very trying times. We obviously had little communication, but that term apprehension was one that resonated simply because you can understand our family was incredibly apprehensive at the role that we understood him to be undertaking along with his associates. I'm very proud and pleased to say that they all arrived home safely, although one young fellow did regrettably pass away on training exercises at Mount Bundy in the Northern Territory some months after they returned from Iraq. I'm equally proud to say that as a result of his efforts as a young lieutenant at the age of 23 years, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for his work in Iraq, indeed the first lieutenant so honoured since Vietnam. He then went back into Afghanistan in 2006, this time as a captain, again as a combat officer. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to have a very clear understanding of the separation between the decisions of government, the decisions that are made in this place, and indeed those who are sent to undertake these roles. And again, I think we learnt lessons from Vietnam, Acting Deputy President, because unfortunately there was a confusion of roles and responsibilities post-Vietnam, and those, regrettably those coming back from the active theatres, seemed to be joined with the parliamentarians of the time, and criticism was levelled at them. I'm very pleased to say, as a result of our own personal experience, I never ever saw at any time criticism of troops returning from those theatres. If people had criticisms, as indeed they had, and I've heard them in this place, and people in a democracy have got their rights to express those criticisms, but indeed they have not been directed at those themselves who were sent to serve. We, of course, at this moment have got mainly aerial services in support of the activities being undertaken. There is no indication from the Prime Minister that they will be elevated to any other further level, but I would urge in my concluding comments to make sure to the Australian people that they always separate the decision-making about the roles that our people are going to undertake, our soldiers, our airmen and our sailors and others, and of course the actions that they undertake. Because the roles, the responsibilities that are given to them as young people, they are prepared for them, they're well trained for them, be under no illusion about that. And of course, I think in this case, as in others, we should always give great accord, as we do in this place, to those who are entrusted to actually undertake the role that the Cabinet, the Exco and the Parliament ultimately require them to do.
Thank you.